In 1952, a widow in Barnsley could feed herself for an entire week on less than 10 shillings. One small ring on the stove, a single saucepan, a bowl to wash. This was the rhythm of daily life. The meals were modest yet satisfying, the same dishes that had once nourished a full family, now scaled down with care and quiet expertise. From porridge in the morning to stews and soups in the evening, each pot carried warmth, sustenance, and independence. Today, these forgotten recipes remind us that cooking for one need not be lonely or costly. In 1952, a widow in Barnsley could keep herself fed for a week on less than 10 shillings. She did not call it budgeting. It was simply how the week was arranged. One ring on the stove, one small saucepan, one bowl drying by the sink. The meals were not grand, yet they were not meager either. They were the same dishes she had once set before a table of 6, only quieter now. Scaled down. Measured with care. Morning began with porridge. Oats tipped into water the night before, a pinch of salt added without looking. By dawn the grains had softened. 5 minutes at a gentle simmer turned them creamy. A spoonful of the thick cream that gathered beneath the milk bottle cap was stirred through at the end. Steam rose into the cold kitchen air. The bowl warmed her hands before the fire did. Later in the week there might be Scotch broth. A small piece of scrag end, pearl barley, diced carrot, turnip, perhaps a leek if the greengrocer had reduced them. The barley did most of the work, swelling and thickening the pot. It was set at the back of the stove and left to murmur. By evening it had become something closer to stew. The second bowl tasted deeper than the first. When money thinned toward Friday, egg drop soup filled the gap. Boiling water, a crumbled cube, one egg poured in slowly. Pale ribbons formed at once. It was ready in minutes. The pot was rinsed, dried, and returned to its place. The week continued, steady and sufficient. There were evenings when the cupboard held only tins and root vegetables, yet that was enough. A tin of tomato soup was warmed slowly in a small pan, loosened with a splash of milk. Thick slices of bread were cut into soldiers and buttered while the soup simmered. The color in the bowl was bright against the worn kitchen table. It was simple, but it felt complete. Leek and potato soup followed the same quiet pattern. 2 leeks sliced thin, softened gently in butter until they gave off their faint sweetness. Potatoes cubed small, covered with water, left to simmer until tender. The fork did the work of a masher. The result was thick and pale, soft enough for tired teeth. It improved overnight, resting in the cool pantry. Sardines on toast required little more than heat. The tin was opened carefully. The fish warmed in their own oil in a small pan, pressed lightly with a fork. The oil soaked into the bread. A squeeze of lemon if one was to hand, a grind of pepper. It took minutes. The smell carried a hint of the sea into streets far from any shore. None of these meals announced themselves as special. They were part of the rhythm of living alone. The ring of the spoon against enamel, the scrape of knife on board, the soft click of the gas turned off. One pot washed. One plate dried. The kitchen returned to stillness until the next hunger called. By midweek, the cooking often grew heartier. Cheese and onion in a pot began with a single onion sliced thin and softened in butter. Cubes of potato were added, then enough milk to cover. The saucepan was left on a low flame until the potatoes yielded easily to a knife. A handful of grated cheddar was scattered over the top and the pot placed beneath the grill. The cheese bubbled and browned at the edges. It was eaten straight from the pan, resting on a folded tea towel. Corned beef hash for one required more attention. A potato diced and boiled until almost tender. Drained and returned to the pot with a spoonful of dripping. A small portion of corned beef cut into neat cubes, half an onion chopped fine. The mixture pressed down and left to form a crust. The sound was gentle, a faint sizzle rather than a fry. It was turned once, carefully, and sometimes crowned with a fried egg if the hens were laying well. Tinned oxtail soup was rarely served as it came. It was poured into a saucepan and improved. A grated carrot stirred in. a splash of Worcestershire sauce or a spoonful of sherry saved for Sundays. 10 minutes on a quiet simmer deepened the color and thickened the broth. The tin became something closer to home cooking. Each dish carried small adjustments learned over years. Nothing wasted. Nothing hurried. The pot held enough for 2 servings, sometimes 3. Supper and tomorrow's dinner settled side by side in the same saucepan. Parsnip and apple soup belonged to the colder months, when the light faded early and the market stalls grew sparse. 2 parsnips were peeled and sliced into coins. 1 cooking apple, sharp and firm, was chopped and added to the pot. A small knob of butter melted at the bottom before the vegetables went in. Water or light stock covered them by an inch. The lid was set slightly askew. Steam escaped in a thin ribbon while the contents softened. After 20 minutes, the parsnips yielded to a fork. The apple had almost dissolved. Everything was mashed together in the same pot. The color turned pale gold. A pinch of curry powder, no more than a 1/4 teaspoon, was stirred through. It did not dominate. It simply warmed the edges of the flavor. If there was cream saved from the morning milk, a spoonful might be added just before serving. Baked beans and sausage followed on another evening. 2 sausages browned gently in their own fat. When they were cooked through, half a tin of beans was tipped in. The sauce thickened as it simmered. A touch of mustard powder sharpened it. Bread waited on the side, ready to catch what remained in the pan. The meal was steady and filling, eaten slowly at the small kitchen table. Kedgeree for one was made when something a little different was desired. A small piece of smoked haddock poached in milk. The same milk used to cook a modest portion of rice. The fish flaked and returned to the pot with a chopped hard-boiled egg and a little butter. The scent was gentle and familiar. It felt like effort without strain. Lentil soup with bacon was often made on a gray afternoon when the house felt cooler than usual. A single rasher of bacon was cut into small pieces and placed in the saucepan first. It released its fat slowly, scent rising into the kitchen. A sliced onion followed, then a diced carrot. They softened together before half a cup of red lentils was stirred in. Water covered everything by a few inches. The pot was left to simmer. Red lentils required no soaking. Within 20 minutes they collapsed into the broth, thickening it naturally. The bacon gave depth without overwhelming the dish. A pinch of salt, a turn of pepper, and the soup was ready. It filled 2 bowls if ladled carefully. The second portion rested in the same pot overnight, flavors settling into one another. Welsh rarebit in a pot was prepared when bread needed using. Grated cheese went into a small saucepan with a splash of milk. A spoon of mustard and a drop of Worcestershire sauce were stirred through. The heat stayed low. The cheese melted slowly into a smooth, pale mixture. A beaten egg was added at the last moment, thickening the sauce. It was poured over toast and placed briefly under the grill until the top bubbled. The saucepan required only a quick rinse. Chicken soup from a carcass marked the end of a roast. The picked bones were placed into a pot with an onion, a carrot, perhaps a stick of celery. Covered with water, they simmered for hours at the back of the stove. The broth turned clear and golden. Strained and seasoned, it carried the memory of Sunday into the middle of the week. Peas porridge began with dried split peas measured into a small saucepan and rinsed under the tap. They were covered with water and set on a low flame. If there was a ham bone saved from an earlier meal, it was lowered into the pot. The peas swelled slowly, softening and breaking apart as they simmered. The surface shifted from thin and watery to thick and steady. A wooden spoon left a clear path when drawn across the bottom. Toward the end, a small knob of butter was stirred in. The porridge was ladled into a bowl and eaten with bread torn by hand. It was plain, but it stayed with you for hours. A stuffed baked potato offered something warmer on evenings when the oven was already lit. 1 large potato was scrubbed clean and pricked with a fork. It baked until the skin turned crisp and the inside yielded easily. The flesh was scooped into a bowl and mashed with butter and a little grated cheese. Sometimes a spoonful of tinned tuna was folded through. Other nights it was chopped chives from the windowsill. The mixture was returned to the skin and set under the grill until lightly browned. It felt generous, though it asked very little. Macaroni cheese from scratch was made in the same saucepan from start to finish. The pasta boiled until nearly tender, then drained and returned to the pot. Butter melted into it, followed by a splash of milk and a handful of grated cheese. Stirred over gentle heat, the sauce formed without fuss. A dusting of breadcrumbs crisped beneath the grill. The bowl was held close, steam rising softly in the quiet kitchen. There were smaller dishes that filled the spaces between these more familiar meals. Rice pudding was often made in a single saucepan rather than the oven when only one portion was needed. A handful of rice was rinsed and added to milk with a spoon of sugar. It simmered gently, stirred now and then to keep it from catching. The grains swelled and softened, the milk thickened to a pale cream. A scraping of nutmeg across the top finished it. It was eaten warm in winter, cool in summer, always from the same bowl. Bubble and squeak for one followed a Sunday dinner. Leftover cabbage and potatoes were chopped fine and pressed into a small frying pan with a little dripping. The mixture browned slowly, edges crisping first. It was turned once, carefully, so the other side could color. Nothing was added beyond salt and perhaps a dash of vinegar. The portion was modest, but it carried forward the flavor of an earlier meal. There were nights when a simple onion gravy poured over toast served as supper. An onion sliced thin and cooked patiently in butter until soft and deep gold. A spoon of flour stirred in, then water added gradually, forming a smooth gravy. It was spooned over thick bread and eaten at once. The sweetness of the onion lingered long after the plate was cleared. These dishes were not written in cookbooks. They were remembered in the hands. Measured without scales. Timed without clocks. The kitchen held their rhythm. Each pot, each spoon, returned to its place when the meal was done. Suet dumpling stew was made when a little flour and patience were enough to turn scraps into something generous. A small onion and carrot were sliced into a saucepan with a spoon of dripping. They softened slowly before a cup of water was added. If there was a fragment of leftover beef or mutton, it was cut small and stirred through. While the broth warmed, a simple dumpling was mixed in a bowl, self-raising flour, a pinch of salt, a spoon of shredded suet, and enough cold water to bind it. The dough was shaped into 1 or 2 rough balls and lowered carefully into the simmering pot. The lid was placed firmly on top. In 20 minutes the dumplings had swollen and turned light. Broken open with a spoon, they released steam scented faintly of fat and flour. Pan Haggerty for one followed a similar spirit. Thin slices of potato were layered in a small pan with slivers of onion and a scattering of cheese. A little butter dotted between the layers. The pan was covered and left on a low heat until the potatoes softened. Toward the end, the lid was lifted and the heat raised slightly so the base could crisp. It was slid onto a plate in one careful movement. Semolina pudding ended the week on a softer note. Milk heated gently, semolina whisked in slowly until it thickened. A spoon of jam placed in the center bled outward as it was stirred. It was plain, warm, and steady. The saucepan rinsed clean without effort. The cupboard closed again until morning. Fish pie for one was a modest delight, often prepared on chilly evenings when the market had just delivered a fresh catch. A small fillet of white fish, cod, haddock, or pollock, was poached gently in milk until it flaked easily. The cooking milk was reserved to enrich the sauce. In a separate pan, a little butter melted, a spoon of flour stirred in, and gradually the poaching milk was added, forming a creamy sauce. A pinch of salt, a twist of black pepper, and a few sprigs of parsley elevated it quietly. The fish was returned to the sauce, and small portions of boiled vegetables, carrots, peas, or diced potato, were folded in. The mixture was spooned into a small oven-proof dish. Mashed potato, prepared from the week's leftover spuds or freshly boiled, was spread carefully over the top, ridged with the back of a fork to catch golden edges. A few dots of butter were scattered across the surface before the dish went under the grill or into a moderate oven. While the top browned, the aroma filled the kitchen, gentle sweetness from the potato, subtle creaminess, and the faint scent of the sea from the fish. When removed, the edges were golden, the filling warm and fragrant. Eaten slowly from the dish itself, it offered both comfort and satisfaction. Leftovers, if any, returned to the saucepan for the following day, flavors melding further. This simple dish exemplified the principle that one could cook for one without waste, without complication, and with care. Each step, each ingredient, spoke of patience and attention. The meal was small, but it carried dignity, nourishment, and the quiet reassurance that even alone, one could eat well, slowly, and fully. Cabbage and potato stew was the kind of dish that warmed both body and kitchen. A small head of cabbage was shredded finely, a couple of potatoes peeled and diced. In a small saucepan, a spoon of dripping or butter melted slowly before the vegetables were added. Water covered them just enough to allow gentle simmering. A pinch of salt and a grind of pepper were enough. No spices were needed to bring out the flavor. The lid rested slightly ajar, letting steam escape while keeping the heat steady. As the potatoes softened and the cabbage wilted, the pot thickened naturally. The vegetables released their sweetness into the cooking water, creating a broth that required no stock cube. The smell was comforting, earthy, and familiar. A widow in Leeds recalled stirring this stew in the evenings, the light from the window casting shadows across the small kitchen table. The pot stayed on the back of the stove, ready for later meals, each portion as satisfying as the first. A small addition could transform the dish. A little leftover ham or bacon added richness. A spoonful of cream from the milk bottle or a sprinkling of grated cheese elevated it further, though neither was necessary. The dish was simple, flexible, and steady, nourishing in both taste and practice. Cabbage and potato stew exemplified the quiet wisdom of cooking for one. It required patience, attention, and care, but no more than that. One pot, one spoon, one bowl, these were the tools of self-sufficiency. Each meal reinforced a rhythm, a pattern, a continuity. Eating alone was not isolation but mastery of one's own sustenance, a small victory in an otherwise ordinary day. These 21-pot meals tell a story of resilience, thrift, and quiet ingenuity. From cheese and onion pots to stewed shin of beef, each dish offered nourishment and comfort with minimal fuss and cost. They were crafted for a single diner yet rich in flavor and history. Try one of these recipes this week, slowly, with attention in a single pot, and experience a connection to the kitchens of the past. Your grandmother's wisdom, her patience, and her skill are not lost. They are waiting, ready to fill your home with warmth and sustenance once more.